Spirit, and what an incredible guest we have, Father Robert Spitzer. And Father, tell us about your background. I know you were president of Gonzaga, and for how many years?
For 11 years there at good old Gonzaga University, and when I left Gonzaga, I saw the urgency of an area in which I'd been teaching at Georgetown University, that's the area of what I'm calling fundamental apologetics, that a lot of our students are leaving the faith. Recent Pew survey indicates this, that we're increasing by 1% per year. So that means that we have moved from about 24% unbeliever. That's believing not even in God, not believing in anything. So, about 24% unbeliever to about 36% unbeliever in the last 11 years. If we keep it up on the same scale, in about 12 years we'll be at Western Europe. The most important question, though, that was asked by the Pew survey of the young people leaving, why? Why are you leaving? 49% of the respondents said unequivocally as their first response, and many others as their second response, because science and rational discourse has thrown faith out the window. Yet the irony of such a statement, and that our kids, like our Catholic kids and Christian kids, believe this, when actually the opposite is the case. In other words, the evidence is overwhelming in the contemporary era. I just couldn't take it anymore. And I just decided I'm going to give my life to showing what the evidence is. Sometimes, I'm telling you, the media does not want to cover it. Yes, National Geographic will cover the Shroud of Turin or the miracles of Mary. But, sometimes you might get something on the History Channel. But if it weren't for EWTN and for Catholic publications, right? We would not know the genuine scientific evidence that's been coming out in scientific journals, but never gets into the popular limelight, right? So the Board of Lincoln and Guth, you'll find it in Physical Review Letters in 2003, which is a very technical journal of physics. But where is it in the popular literature? Almost hidden from view. All these other things that I'm going to talk about in the Shroud of Turin, in the technical scientific journals, the evidence is immense. Where, besides National Geographic and one part of one program on the History Channel, are we getting this in the popular media? It's absolutely essential that we get it out there, and so maybe I can shamelessly give my website, magiscenter.com. That's MAGIS Center.com. Lots of free material on all this evidence. Please share it with your young people before they make a fatal error.
And you're president of the Magis Center, and tell us about the Magis Center.
Right, the Magis Center is pretty much what I kind of happened into, not happened into, but very consciously got into after my presidency at Gonzaga. Our hope was that we could make a real effect on this kind of, I won't say hemorrhaging, but very, very quick loss of young people from faith for rational reasons, that we could stem the tide of that by means of social media, documentaries, books and technical articles, a group of what we're going to call the Academic Society of Faith and Reason that we are also starting among all the various professors, in secular, Catholic, Christian universities, variety of other sources. So we've got about 7 different channels that we're trying to utilize to bring the information, which I've written about in about 10 different books. They're kind of scholarly books, they're kind of heavy, but if you go to the website, there's all kinds of workbooks, videotapes, easier methods of getting the information, right? You don't have to plow through a bunch of equations in physics, in the videotapes. But if you want the equations, they're there in the book, and you can get those too, and also the technical articles. So we really want to show not only that the church has been so involved in science for years, and certainly the case, but the contemporary evidence for Jesus, for God, and the soul is simply overwhelming.
And that's the important point, my brothers and sisters, is that if you want to take a scientific approach, and I think all of us at some point really go down that road, the science is there to point to Jesus, to point to God. And we have these new peer-reviewed studies of near-death experiences. Tell us about that.
Yeah, that's just another area. I mean, in addition to the stuff that's coming out in physics, like, the Board of Lincoln and Guth proof and the new anthropic coincidences, which are unbelievable. That may be for another program or something, but they also, God has just given us these peer-reviewed medical studies of near-death experiences. The most recent one of 2014 by Samuel Parnia, report again in the Journal of Resuscitation, peer-reviewed medical journal. Very, very important study. 2,060 patients, where he analyzed it over several years, but took a look at, the central veridical data, that human beings are actually capable of surviving bodily death. I mean, I can sum it up, in just a few lines, but there's an immense literature now on this. Neuroscientists like Mario Beauregard and many others, right, have also responded to the physicalist objections. But just in a nutshell, here's the evidence that they're uncovering. Number one, when our soul leaves the body, and for lack of a better word, I'll call it a soul, but it has dimension. It has length and height, and it can move and so forth. But it sees, it hears, all right. After death, and not only that, it can remember. It's got all of its memories in place. If you had a bad memory when you died, your memory is significantly improved in the afterlife, as it were. You can also remember what's going on around you. Of course, there's self-consciousness that's present. All of the emotions of love and beauty are intact. Everything is amazing. Now, you say, well, what's the proof of that? How about starting with this? 80% of blind people, most of whom were blind from birth, see 20/20 and can report veridical data. That is to say, unique, verifiable data after the fact by independent, researchers after the fact. They can actually see. 80% see. Now, you tell me how this is physically explicable by hallucinations or something else. Remember, if you're going to have a hallucination, you got to have something in your brain to hallucinate. And for all intents and purposes, blind people don't have such images in their brain. They have no memories of spatial juxtaposition. They have no memories of color. How in the world can they make comparative color analysis, like the shoelaces on that nurse are the same color as the doctor's hair, red, right? Whatever. I mean, how can they say, make comparative color or comparative spatial analyses? They don't even know how to describe it. They don't even have a vocabulary, yet they're making accurate reports. And by the way, it's not just blind people who accurately report what they're seeing after death. It's, of course, people who have vision, normal vision, and so forth and so on, report the same kinds of things. And, of course, they are reporting these things so accurately, the kinds of machines that doctors are using, right? You can, right? You're not subject to, the limitations of matter. You can go right through the hospital wall, as one lady did, and was looking at the hospital from the outside, looking in, or looking at it, and of course sees a tennis shoe out there in the third floor of the hospital with its shoelace tucked under the heel and a worn left toe. One of the researchers, of Melvin Moore's goes out in that ledge and discovers there it is, precisely as reported. Mr. So-and-so, we lost your dentures. Nah, you didn't. No, the nurse over there who had the blonde hair ripped them out of my mouth right before they put the paddles on me, opened the drawer underneath the machine that looks just like this, and threw them in there, and then they gave me the paddles. And of course, if you look in that drawer, you'll see my dentures, right? Go through the walls into the waiting room and hear your brother-in-law speaking badly of you when you're there, and right, never speak badly of the dead. So the key thing, of course, is yes, these are accurate reports, and they're so accurate that Dr. Janice Holden actually found that in 80% of the cases, the accuracy far surpassed anything in a courtroom by people who had natural eyes, they literally, under the strictest standards, were reporting a kind of errorless precision of what they were seeing. Now, that's just the first part. I mean, the second part deals with what happens when they go to this heavenly domain beyond this earth. They leave the waiting room, and they leave the operating room, and they see, this divine white light who is unconditionally loving and beautiful, who they associate with God or Jesus. Little kids see Jesus all the time, right? Deceased relatives and friends who report things to them that they could have never known because the relatives died when they were children or something of that nature. All these kinds of things. There have been 46 major there's a whole, not just major medical studies, and books written on these things. There's a whole division of the medical school at the University of Virginia that studies these things. And of course, you just go to the website, just click on a free article called Science, Medicine, and Near-Death Experiences. You can get it. But I mean, if that's not a clue that you're going to survive bodily death and that there's a loving God out there, boy, you got to really do some massive naturalistic rationalization to get out of it, because the evidence is overwhelming. We're dealing with thousands of cases here. And of course, I think this speaks to young people very profoundly. But that's just one thing that's going on in the contemporary era. I mean, indeed, why should our kids be leaving the faith for lack of evidence? The evidence from science, as I've been saying, is overwhelming.
We're with Father Robert Spitzer. We're going to be right back to talk more about that overwhelming evidence and also some new thinking around the Shroud of Turin. We'll be right back.